Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. You guessed that right, I'm your host, Eric McMahon. Coming off the heels of another slam-packed weekend. We had Bellator, we had UFC, and guess what? We had the Power Slap finale. The man who was there, he's going to break all of this down for us. And looking ahead to UFC 286 this weekend, John Morgan, what's up, pal?
Oh man, I'm good. I'm crazy. I'm a little under the weather, but we battled through. But it was a fun week. Like you said, attending all three events in a stretch of a little more than 30 hours. San Jose, Las Vegas, nothing I'd rather be doing, man. It was a crazy weekend, and like you said, it just continues to keep going. So love it.
We have a lot to touch on. One of the things I want to dive into is, like, you were there live at Power Slap finale. I want to put that in the back burner right now. I do want to get into it. I don't know which one took top billing on the weekend. Was it Nurmagomedov just absolutely running through, or was it Dvalishvili absolutely running through their respected opponents? I don't know which one, but from one that just looked a little more impressive to me, I'm going to start Bellator 292 from San Jose. You were there. Usman Nurmagomedov absolutely just runs through Benson Henderson 2.5 minutes into the first round, made it look easy, was never in contention, drops him with a question mark kick. Then it's academic from there. You said this last week, the unsubmittable, unchokeable Benson Henderson gets rear naked choked by Usman Nurmagomedov. Go.
Yeah, I agree. To be honest with you, this was the story of the weekend for me. And I know that may seem a little shocking to some people, but Usman Nurmagomedov is the real deal. I mean, undefeated now at 17-0. And as you said, I favored him to beat Benson Henderson. I mean, the result didn't necessarily surprise me that he beat Benson Henderson, but the fact that he just absolutely ran through him, right? I mean, just dropped him with this, as you said, beautiful question mark kick. I mean, the technique on that was spectacular. And then got to the back and was able to get this rear naked choke. Didn't come easy. Benson Henderson throughout his career has shown an incredible ability to defend rear naked chokes, to defend guillotine chokes, to get out of these positions, but just absolutely could not get out of this position. And you get the submission in under half a round. I mean, that's pretty spectacular. And then, of course, Benson Henderson called it quits at the end of the day, but Usman Nurmagomedov continues to roll on. He's got Islam Makhachev in his corner. I mean, imagine you got the UFC champ in the corner of the Bellator champ. I mean, it was just pretty spectacular visually. And, man, Usman is the real deal, man. This kid is destined for great things. At such a young age, to think about where he is at such a young age. Incredible.
23 years old, correct?
24? I think 24. I think 24 at this point. Yeah, 24 at this point.
Here's what made that amazing, this performance. It's not like, okay, you can get these young guys and they just, they're full of piss and vinegar, a great talent, and they just run. They can just physically at this point, overwhelm somebody with technique and physicality. That's not really what happened here, though, right? What happened here is he showed an array all over the board of how superior dominant he was against a former, multiple-time world champion. We already talked about the question mark kick. That was beautiful. I think it would have tricked almost anybody. It was the legitimately fake logo high kick, drops him, jumps his back. And like you said, the choke did not come easy. But if you're watching the way I'm watching as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, the way he eventually sets up this rear naked choke, he's fighting hands, he's hitting, he's going across the chin, across the face. They do a couple rolls this way, that way. And it's all set up. It wasn't by chance that he finally got his arm underneath that neck. He set it up from the get-go, which was just beautiful technique. I mean, very like Gordon Ryan-esque. If you watch Gordon Ryan grapple, he's always, feinting with the left side to get this under, then switching back and forth, doing little things. That's kind of what Usman did in this situation. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's what makes him so impressive, right? As you said, if he was just like the younger, stronger guy, right? If it's he's 24 years old, he's stronger, he's got more cardio because this is an older guy or whatever, that would be one thing. But to come in with that technique and to show striking technique and grappling technique, because as you said, I think that's what maybe as you're starting to learn the grappling game and understand the grappling game, you have to realize the people that are experts at it, they're not just doing things to see what happens. They're doing things to make you do something to open up the offense that they are trying to set in. And that's where Usman is at. So to think that a guy that has incredible grappling technique, but can also show incredible technique on the feet as well and outwork you there and outperform you there, he just really does look like the total package. And I mean, the reigning champion, undefeated, takes out a former UFC and WEC champion, looks like the favorite in the tournament. And this field, look, man, this Grand Prix field is stacked. There's some names in it. And the winner that comes out of this, Bellator president Scott Coker is like, look, I think whoever wins this has a real case as the best lightweight in the world. And I know that's going to be like, well, come on, they're not in the UFC. But the guy's training with the UFC champion is the Makhachev, who's the best in the world right now. So, while you may not be able to claim it or you may not be able to say it because people are going to, automatically defer to the UFC champion, you're starting to see, man, the technique of other guys elsewhere is on that same level. This was just a statement-making performance from Usman Nurmagomedov.
There's no way to prove to the mass public who would be the best lightweight in the world if Nurmagomedov goes on and wins this Grand Prix. But that training room in Dagestan will know, and gosh, to be a fly on the wall. Let's take it one step further. Imagine the reign that these two individuals will have, right? Training with each other. Let's hypothetically say the 1 and 2 greatest fighters in the world are training partners and train with each other day in and day out. And not only are they some of the best grapplers on the planet, their striking is going leaps and bounds every time we see them.
It's unbelievable. The quality of the training that's happening in that room is incredible. It's just continuing to make them better and better. I mean, the corner that Usman had, I put out a tweet. He had Islam Mamedov in his corner as well. He had Umar Nurmagomedov in his corner as well. I think combined, I wish I had it in front of me right now. But I think combined as mixed martial artists, they're like 78-2-1. It's insane. I mean, the level that these guys are great, and they're just continuing to make themselves better. And again, think about what you just said. It's amazing. The reigning Bellator lightweight champion, the reigning UFC lightweight champion, they train together, making each other better every single day, and they do it all day long. I was at the hotel afterwards. Their post-fight party, they were down in the hotel lobby. They had a couple pizzas and a couple Cokes. That's about as far as they go. That's their celebration. Then they go back, get a good night's sleep, and they're back in the training room the next day. I mean, the dedication among these athletes, they're not going out and partying and celebrating everything. They just had a little pizza and some soda, and they'll be back in the training room on Monday morning. It's incredible.
And then when they're not in Dagestan, just going up against each other, then they're getting world-class instruction at AKA with the dogs in that room as well. Unbelievable.
It's the team that they have built, man. The culture that they have built is incredible. And Usman's the cream of the crop right now. But there's a handful of them. There's a bunch of that team that are continuing to dominate, man. It's the legacy of Khabib Nurmagomedov has been well established, but man, it's incredible to watch.
I'm gonna put. I didn't plan on this, but I'm gonna put you on the spot right now. After seeing what Nurmagomedov did this weekend, Makhachev, Nurmagomedov, who you got?
Woo! I mean, listen, I guess the training partners can tell you, but I will say this, man. The striking of Usman Nurmagomedov is a lot more dynamic, man. I mean, I would say that if Islam could get that fight on the ground, he's got more of that old school kind of. We're calling Khabib old school, man, but he's got that like that wrist control, that Dagestani handcuffs kind of wrestle ride that he does, where it just swarms you and smothers you. He's really, really good at that. He's also, I feel like, naturally bigger. After standing next to both of them, I feel like he's the naturally bigger guy that probably has like a harder weight cut, but I think he probably weighs more on fight night. But the striking of Usman is far more dynamic. He's got those kicks that come from all angles. He's a little bit quicker there as well. So, yeah, if Usman could keep it standing, I'd probably take him. You know, I mean, I guess they could probably tell us the truth, and I don't think they'll ever tell. It was funny. I actually asked Usman, I'm like, hey, what's the trash talk like with you guys on the mat? Like, do you remind him like how much older he is than you, or how you're the young guy? Just what's the trash talk? And I will say, Usman they're so respectful of each other. They'll never tell us, right? He's like, no, he's the pound for pound number one. I would never disrespect him like that. So I mean, they have such love and respect for each other, but they know the truth. But if I'm watching from the outside, if it's a striking fight, you got to take Usman, right?
I mean, aside from the fact that I agree with the sentiment that you said, is like I would probably lean towards Makhachev just because he's naturally the bigger guy.
Yep.
But I mean, Usman ran through Ben Henderson in under 2.5 minutes.
Crazy.
Now that Ben Henderson, the former WEC lightweight champion, the former UFC lightweight champion with a pro record of 30-12. Here's an interesting statistic. And I just realized it as I was prepping. Like he has as many Bellator fights as he had UFC fights.
It's wild. I didn't realize that until this week. We were talking about it a little bit in San Jose, just kind of recapping the career. This is before we knew that he was going to retire at the end of it, but just kind of talking about it leading in with some of the staff there. And it's like, man, a lot of obviously people are always going to remember Benson Henderson as a former UFC and WC champ. But as you said, the same number of fights, I think 14 apiece, both in Bellator and the UFC. He spent a lot of time around there. And Scott Coker had a lot of admiration for him. He said, look, obviously I didn't promote his whole career, but he was one of those first big name free agents that we got to come over from the UFC and to really kind of change the reputation of Bellator. Scott Coker knew that, hey, we need to show that this is a destination for people to come compete at. So we had to go chase a couple of big names. And Benson Henderson was one of those first big names that took a shot on coming over here and moving to a different organization, because that's not an easy thing to do, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're competing for money. I mean, it's prize fighting. As long as the paycheck clears, that's what matters. But, the UFC has been a leader in the brand for so long that there's always been this reputation that, like, if I'm going to be the best in the world, I'm going to compete here. But Bellator wanted to show that, hey, listen, there are opportunities to ply your trade here and to show who you are outside of the UFC. And they needed a couple big names to really kind of start that. And since then, you've seen a lot. You've seen the Corey Andersons of the world comes over. Phil Davis was another big name as well. Ryan Bader, of course. But Benson Henderson was one of those first big names that made the move. And as you said, it's been 14 fights over there. Pretty wild.
I'm glad you kind of brought that up because it was something that I wanted to touch on. And in my opinion, legend gets thrown around a lot. And I don't know if we could really tag Benson Henderson with that legend status. And really, I don't know if we can or can't based off the resume. I mean, 28 fights between Bellator and the UFC, not counting WEC. I mean, that's freaking amazing just in that stat alone. Whether he's a legend or not, that's up for debate because I think it gets thrown around too much. So let's try and temper that to a degree. But I'm glad you brought up that point about him crossing over into Bellator, because what my mind goes to is he legitimized it to a degree. Bellator was always way second fiddle to UFC. It was always the second best destination, but it was definitely way, way second fiddle. And then as that influx happened with the, Benson Henderson, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Corey Anderson, Ryan Bader, but Benson Henderson was one of the first, and he brought it to that. And moreover, and it wasn't because this unbeatable prospect chose Bellator. It was really because now he went in and started facing Bellator talent and didn't win every one of his fights. I mean, he went in his first fight. I think he lost his first fight I forgot who it was against. I think he was maybe like 1-3. And then he loses to Michael Chandler, who was still under the Bellator banner at the time. And that showed everybody, this guy who always found a way to win, always in the UFC, by hook or by crook, he always found a way to win, wasn't getting it done early in his Bellator career, which I think that opened up a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, I think about that term legend, as you say, it's debatable. But if there was just a straight mixed martial arts Hall of Fame, right, not tied to an organization or anything, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Famer. He is an MMA Hall of Famer. So to that point, what he's accomplished is incredible. But you're right, he did have a hard road. He went over to the Bellator, and it was an interesting case study at the time, right? Because if you're, as an organization, going to invest in a big money free agent, right, you're going to spend a little, because you got to spend a little extra to get them to come over there, right? They understand that they're kind of giving up that opportunity to be in the UFC, so you got to pay them a little extra. Now, once you spend that money to bring that person over, you have kind of two ways of doing it, right? Either A, you can give them showcase fights to let them get wins and show, like, hey, look, the guy that you remember, he's over here and he's winning in our organization now. Or you could throw that high-priced free agent to the Wolves, and you could show them that, hey, that guy that you saw winning over there, he came over here, and he struggled a little bit. And I think that's what Bellator did. And it's not necessarily maybe the nicest thing, because, as you said, he came out, he went up to welterweight right away, and he fought Andrei Koreshkov, who was an absolute monster. I remember when it got announced, I thought, oh, my gosh, what are they doing? Like, this is going to be a tough assignment. And it was. And he got outworked in a decision. Then he went on to beat Patricio Pitbull. Then he lost to Michael Chandler. He lost to Patricky Pitbull. You look at those four names, and those are four of Bellator's finest. Unbelievable. Yeah. And I think that's what Bellator did. I think they said, look, we're going to match him up with the toughest matchups that we can, because we're going to show that, hey, we have talent on our roster too. It's not that he's going to come over here and dominate the division. And to Benson's credit, he was willing to do that. I mean, till the very end, like, think about it. Benson Henderson knew coming in this week, he said, look, I've got 3 fights left on my deal with Bellator. Should I be able to win this Grand Prix, that would be all 3 fights, and then I'm going to retire. His wife is starting to compete now, and he wants to give her an opportunity to chase her professional career. But until the very end, he decided he wanted to compete at the highest level. He didn't say, I've got 3 fights left, and I want, these matchups that are kind of easy, that'll take me out, simple, I can collect some paychecks and ride off into the sunset. He said, put me into this lightweight Grand Prix, because I'm going to try to win this tournament. And, oh, by the way, give me the champ right away. Give me the toughest assignment possible, the very first one. I mean, that's the kind of guy that Benson Henderson was. And it really did, as you said, kind of, I think, help people understand that, look, there are phenomenal fighters everywhere. Does the UFC have the deepest roster? Absolutely. The UFC has 600 athletes under contract, and all of them are studs. And you look at, like, their top 10, it's better than any other organization's top 10 in the world. But they don't have every good fighter on the planet. There are other great fighters competing in other organizations. And I think Benson Henderson, helped to show that.
And Nurmagomedov getting some revenge against, for Team Khabib, because Benson Henderson 2 fights ago, before Peter Quilley knocked off Mamedov, which was a very controversial decision, but it was that was such a fun fight. And I bring that up because that was the showcase fight of, like, there's new talent here in Mamedov. And Benson Henderson was like, don't write me off yet. And he put in a stellar performance there. And everybody was like, regardless of whether you thought he won or lost, he was supposed to get ran through in that fight. And he ended up winning. I mean, he ended up catching Mamedov in probably like 6 or 7 deep guillotines in that fight. You see Khabib in the corner going ballistic that whole fight. I remember that like it was yesterday. Khabib looks like his head is going to explode because Benson just keeps grabbing the neck and they couldn't get out. And he rode that to a split decision victory. And then, the legend of Benson Henderson and the Hall of Fame status just continued to grow a little bit more.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, a lot of people scored it the other way, but to your point, it didn't really matter. It just proved the fact that, hey, Benson is still competitive with anybody. And it's the crazy part about this game, right? I mean, you're talking about, 1 percentage point, 2 percentage point slips just a little bit. Everybody's competing at such a high level. That changes the result between victory and loss. But that performance right there showed that Benson Henderson still belonged at the top of the game.
So what is, if 20 years from now, people are going to say, Benson Henderson, what's his legacy? What is he going to be remembered as?
It's interesting, man, because I asked him about this, and he was like, look, you know what, I'll let you guys, write that. But what I want people to know and to remember about me is that I worked hard. Like, I was never the greatest athlete. I was never the most naturally gifted. I just worked my tail off to get where I am. And I definitely will remember that about him. I mean, this is somebody that went from the WEC to the UFC to Bellator. I mean, fought a who's who list. You start going through his record and reading off the names of people he competed against. It's unbelievable. He literally fought everybody during his era, and I think that's incredible. And worked his tail off to be good at it, and had incredible success along the way. Continues to be a coach and a partner at the MMA lab out in Arizona. I mean, they've established a phenomenal team out there with Benson Henderson and John Crouch. So I think that legacy is there. I mean, as I said, if there was an MMA Hall of Fame, he would definitely go into it. To be a champion in WC, which, again, maybe that was a division that didn't necessarily get the respect that it deserved because it was kind of a quote unquote second tier type organization, but the talent that was in there wasn't second tier. So to be a champion of that organization, to be a champion of the UFC, and then to be competing at the highest level in Bellator, I mean, that is the legacy. To somebody that was willing to take on all comers, regardless of what banner it was under, never asked for an easy fight, always took the most difficult road. That was Benson Henderson, man, and I have a lot of respect for him, man. He wasn't always the most enjoyable guy. It was really actually funny in the post-fight press conference because there were times along the way where you could tell he just did not want to talk to media at all. Like, was just annoyed that he had to be there. And I kind of asked him, like, hey, anything you change, you do different. He's like, I wish, and I think this is a good lesson for a lot of people in any career, actually. He did say, I wish along the way I would have stopped to smell the roses a little bit. He's like, I didn't really take the time to enjoy the moments. He's like, even things like, being here and speaking to you guys in the media, he's like, I might never do this again. And I didn't enjoy those moments along the way. It was kind of an emotional moment, but just to kind of lighten it up, I was like, oh yeah, we remember, Benson. We remember that you didn't like talking to us, and everybody kind of laughed a little bit. But it was funny for him to kind of recognize that at the end. But I think it's a good lesson. Like, man, these careers and these lives, man, they're so intense at the moment. But take that little time to enjoy it along the way, because there comes a moment where it all wraps up and you don't get to experience it anymore. And if you didn't take the time to really appreciate what you're doing along the way, it kind of goes wasted,
I think he's going to be remembered for a couple things, like little things that I notice. He, in a time where political and religious climates are always maybe not looked upon favorably. Benson Henderson always put his Christian faith out there first. Came out to Awesome God. I always knew that when I heard that song, and I grew up on that song. I love that song, right? So that's one that it will always stick out to me about Benson Henderson. The other one, and I preferenced this earlier, more important and equally as important, probably more popular, is he was a guy who always found a way to win. He found a way to win. And he had more controversial decisions than anybody, I think, on anybody that I can think of. He had more controversial, high-level decision victories. But it was always because he was such and this is maybe where his nickname comes from, smooth competitor. He was never too fast, never too slow. He always progressed, always found a way to win. And because he wasn't flashy and he read his opponents, he took his time to study the fights. He never banked the first round. You know what I mean? He never did that. He was almost like a calculator in his head. And he eventually was, you look at those Michael Chandler fights. Michael Chandler was beating him pillar to post in the first couple rounds. And then Benson always turned the tide, in which he would always do. And he would find a way to win. That's the legacy of Benson Henderson. He is a guy who always did what it took to find a way to win. And a guy who almost kicked the shit out of me at the Pyramid in Long Beach at Nogi Worlds. That's his legacy.
That's hilarious. And a guy that fought with a toothpick in his mouth on several occasions, which I think is hilarious as well. But let me just read it. His WEC debut in 2009 was against Anthony Njokuani, right? I mean, a phenomenal striker. Obviously, his brother in the UFC. Let me read this. This is just consecutive. I'm not picking and choosing here. This is just consecutive opponents. Anthony Njokuani, Shane Roller, Donald Cerrone, Jamie Varner, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Mark Bocek, Jim Miller, Clay Guida, Frankie Edgar, Nate Diaz, Gilbert Melendez, Anthony Pettis, Josh Thompson, Rustam Habilov, Rafael Dos Anjos, Donald Cerrone, Brandon Thatch, Jorge Masvidal, Andre Koreshkov, Patricio Pitbull, Michael Chandler, Patricky Pitbull, Roger Huerta. I mean, that's just, I didn't pick and choose there. That's just consecutive opponents that he fought.
Insane. Is that made me one of the hardest roads I've ever heard.
across three
I mean,
different organizations.
let's just say, like, who was the easy fight out of there? Jamie Varner, he fought in the UFC. He was the WEC lightweight champion. He comes into the UFC. He knocks out, oh gosh, I forgot who Jamie Varner was the beast. And that was maybe the guy who you'd say, like, if there was anybody that wasn't the cream of the crop, it was Jamie Varner. But guess what? In his time, Jamie Varner was the cream of the crop.
It's insane. People may go, the one I was thinking of as I was reading those, I bet there's a lot of people that don't remember Shane Roller. They might be like, Shane Roller, who is that? He's like 3-time All-American wrestler. No big deal. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane. Those names are just incredible. And again, that was back to back. Unbelievable.
All right, wrapping up Bellator 292. Usman runs through and absolutely dominates Benson Henderson, but he is a surefire first ballot Hall of Fame, WEC champion, UFC lightweight champion. The resume that John Morgan just read, unbelievable. Let's move on to another venue that you were at the it wasn't at the Apex, because we're going to get to that. What was it?
It was at the Theater at Virgin Hotels is what it's called, which is basically, it's the old joint at the Hard Rock.
Merab Dvalishvili dominates. I don't think anybody saw this coming. Petr Yan was skunked on all the scorecards. 50-45 across the board. Yeah. One of two things has happened here. Petr Yan is taking a tremendous backstep, or Dvalishvili can do this against anybody in the world. I don't know which one.
I lean towards the latter, to be honest with you. I liked Merab Dvalishvili here as an underdog. That's what's crazy. I mean, it wasn't crazy to me. I understood. I just feel like Merab has been kind of riding under the radar for most people. But the dude has, as you could see in this matchup, incredible wrestling and insane cardio. And he can just do it forever and ever. And I actually really liked him here to win this fight as an underdog. But what I thought was, he's going to get 3 out of the 5 rounds. You know what I mean? He's going to use that wrestling.
Petr Yan would piece him up at some point.
Absolutely. You're like, he's going to have to deal with some adversity. He's probably going to get wobbled a couple of times and have to get through that. I did not see Merab Dvalishvili whitewashing Petr Yan here, just absolutely blanking him here 5-0. I didn't see that one happening. So incredible performance. And I mean, it's just, again, it's a guy that I think had been flying under the radar a little bit, who makes a statement here with the performance. I think this is one where people say, okay, wait a minute, this is a legitimate contender. Now, we started this whole discussion by saying, which one of these events of the weekend was the bigger event, was the bigger story? And I said I lean towards Bellator because of Usman Nurmagomedov and his rise. But the other reason is this, is Merab Dvalishvili, to me, is the number one contender. To me, he already was the number one contender in the UFC bantamweight division. The reason I say it's the smaller story is because he's not going to fight the champion. Him and Aljamain Sterling are training partners, but they've even said, we go further than training partners. We're brothers. We will never fight. So this is one of those weird ones where it's an incredibly amazing performance. You make a statement, but the follow-up to that statement isn't there because you're not going to fight for the title. And I respect it. Let me preface this by saying I respect that. I think it's so cool to have such a brotherhood with a guy that you're saying, I know he's the champion. I'd love to be the champion, but my brother is the champion, so I'm not going to fight him for it. I respect the hell out of that. But in terms of headlines and stories and moving it forward, I think that just kind of, makes Merab move to the back a little bit because he's not going to fight for the title next.
And he's not out. He's not the mouthpiece and the agitator that maybe Aljamain Sterling is, his teammate. Now, contrary of, I guess, opinion here, right? What angle you look at this determines how good or bad it is. Merab Dvalishvili says title shot dilemma is a good thing. It's a good problem to have. On the contrary, Dana White says if he doesn't want to fight for the title and doesn't want to take a title shot, that is very bad for him. I think Uncle Dana's going to win at the end of the day. What say you?
Yeah, and I think Dana, obviously it was a very busy day and it was a very long day with a lot of things going on. And I think when he was asked about it, I don't think he was necessarily trying to say, listen, I don't like Merab, or I think Merab's screwing up here. But it is a bad position to be in. Now fortunately, Merab and Aljamain Sterling have, I mean, they've kind of had this pact they've talked about for a while. Aljamain has said, look, if I beat Henry Cejudo, you know, I'll probably just move up to 45 at that point so that my brother, you know, this relationship goes both ways. They don't want to fight each other, but Aljamain has also said, I love my brother Merab so much that I'm not going to stay here in his division and not allow him to fight for the title. I'll move up a weight class and allow him to fight for the title. So I don't think at the end of the day, it's going to be as bad as maybe those quotes and those headlines would suggest. But I think what Dana is saying is right. Were they to want to be in the same division, it would be terrible for Merab, right? Because why would the UFC put fast rising contenders, top talent against you if if you beating them means that you're not going to fight for the title? Because that just means we don't have a contender. If you're the number one contender and you fight the number two contender and you win, but you're not going to face the champ, then what are we even doing here? So I think Dana wasn't trying to be, personal or attacking. I think he was just being honest. Like, look, if you're going to be in this position and you're not willing to fight for the title, you're not doing us any favors whatsoever. So if you're not doing us any favors, guess what? We're not doing you any favors. So long term, it would be a bad position for Merab, but fortunately, I think these guys have talked about it. And if Aljamain beats Henry Cejudo coming up, I think that could be it right there. He might move up a weight class, move to 45, and then put that belt on the line so that Merab can fight for it against maybe a Sean O'Malley, maybe against a Chito Vera. You got a lot of top names there at 35 right now.
When I watched this fight, obviously how good Dvalishvili was coming, it was definitely jumping through the screen at you. But on the heels of a boxing victory this week as well, I was thinking it's crazy to me that Jose Aldo got as much shit from that fight as he did, but yet put up a better performance than Petr Yan did.
Yeah, it's funny you put it that way, man. I think, for Jose Aldo, when he walked away, he was still contending at the highest level. Like, he still had the ability to be there. It's just, I think there were so many names that he didn't necessarily see a clear path to the top, and that's why he decided to hang it up. And as you said, now pursuing this boxing career, which is awesome to watch as well, to see him chasing that passion and still competing. But yeah, I mean, listen, Jose Aldo deserves a lot of credit for how, it wasn't the most fun fight to watch, but to show what he was able to do in that just shows how great his defensive wrestling was, how great his takedown defense is. Because look, it was funny, man. I don't necessarily think about my rankings all the time, right? Like, I vote in the UFC rankings panel, and I went to go change my bantamweight rankings, and I forgot I already had Merab at number one. Even before he won this weekend, I already had him as the number one contender. I mean, that's how good that dude is. So yeah, Aldo deserves a little bit more credit. That wasn't the most exciting fight to watch there in Salt Lake City, but it just goes to show you how high of a level Aldo was competing at when he decided to walk away.
Do you think Dana, I don't think Dana, because he's probably got so many things going on, but you think he ever sits back and says, I may have been a little unfair to Jose Aldo out the door when I said that, he just wasn't there tonight and he just was checked out of this fight?
I doubt he reflects too much, like you said, because he's got a lot going on. But I think there's certainly times where Dana says something that's kind of, instantaneous reaction and then probably regrets it later on or thinks about it a little bit differently. But I mean, that's what happens, right? He shows up in the press conference and we want to know what he has to say. We want to know what he's thinking. Yeah. And, and there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, there's you got to think about the high stakes of what they're doing and the financial success or failure that's involved. And, he's hypercritical of wanting the product to be perfect 100% every single time. And so I think sometimes when he's reflecting, it's not necessarily just from a pure martial arts standpoint. It's from a business standpoint as well, and I think in reflection, he may think a little bit different. So I don't think he reflects on it very often, but I think that's one where, yeah, he may have been a little bit off that night, but that happens.
It definitely happens. And let's move on. Co-main event. We saw Alexander Volkov show that he is still a contender in that heavyweight division. Maybe not the contender one or two fights, but he's definitely a name to be reckoned with. He's definitely that gatekeeper to a title shot. So he comes out there, he completely outclasses Alexander Romanov, had him hurt and tired real early. And if you watch this fight, though, Conor McGregor kind of made this strike very popular. This front kick to the diaphragm. and it just wrecked Romanov.
It really did. And Volkov, man, I mean, he's such a big, tall, long dude that he can, hit that strike from distance. And I think when he's executing at his highest level, you're right. He's a dangerous dude. Not necessarily somebody that you're saying, certain future champion, but I think a gatekeeper is a really good word. And I hate it because it feels like gatekeeper has such a negative connotation, and it's not. It's just saying, that's somebody you have to get through if you're going to compete at the highest level.
Perennial top 10.
That's it. And that's where Volkov is. And made this look kind of easy, if we're being honest. And I feel bad for Romanov because not that long ago, he was a prospect that a lot of people were really high on, saying, oh, this dude's upside is going to be tremendous. And I think his stock is about as low as it's ever been since he came to the UFC. It was not a great performance. But yeah, Volkov, crafty, man. Crafty, showed some defensive wrestling, which is, always kind of been his biggest struggle. But he looked good there, and this was a great performance. He's got a big fight coming up next.
And how Conor McGregor just zapped Chad Mendes in their fight with those front flick kicks to the stomach. I mean, Volkov, I think probably 4 or 5 times, and you could watch that power meter just like just go down. And then he basically shot in on, I think DC was like, he was hurt with the jab. He was hurt with those front kicks. And that's what did him in.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. Investing in the body, right? I mean, it's the touch to the chin, the highlight reel finishes that people are seeking. But man, investing in the body, that can really do. And look, it didn't even take long here. You talk about leg kicks and body work, and okay, that works over time. It can work pretty quickly. You know what I mean? If you do it right. So he cashed in the rewards there.
The makeup fight that was from the fight night the previous week, I broke it here just by looking on the internet.
Yep.
Nikita Krylov, Ryan Spann rebooked. This was actually the fight I was looking forward to see most, and yeah, it kind of delivered. It delivered in very short fashion. Krylov essentially out sprinted Ryan Spann in this fight, and Ryan Spann, I think maybe was a little high on, riding a little high, got cracked early, didn't settle into the fight, then wanted to get it back very quickly, and then it just kind of like a snowball going downhill. Now, to his credit, got up a couple times, got out of some submissions, threw up some submissions that probably didn't have a high success rate, and Krylov just kind of weathered him down in a couple minutes and ends up getting a triangle choke victory over Ryan Spann in very impressive fashion. And that's saying how high I think of Ryan Spann.
Yeah, this was kind of a heartbreaking one for me, I guess. And nothing against Nikita Krylov. Like, Nikita, that's what he does, right? He causes chaos, and he attacks quickly. I mean, the guy doesn't go the distance, right? He makes things happen very quickly. So when he fights, that's why it's always fun to watch him. When he competes, something weird's going to happen. Something wild's going to happen because that's what he does. But couldn't help but be heartbroken for Ryan Spann, right? I mean, he had the rescheduling through nothing to do of his own. He had the emotional discussion with us backstage after the main event was canceled. He gets rescheduled and then ultimately comes up short and is tapped out here. This one made me a little sad, if I'm being honest with you, because I know how hard Ryan Spann has worked, and I know that when you look, man, maybe this fight happens different if it happens 2 weeks ago. That's the crazy thing about this sport, right? It's just because you see it one way one night doesn't mean it would be the same way on another night. So maybe if it had happened 2 weeks ago in a main event, it goes down completely different. So this was kind of a heartbreaker for me because, again, rescheduled through no fault of his own, and then you come up short with a loss. But that's Nikita, man. This dude is dangerous. He's had some wins, he's had some losses. I mean, again, another guy that gatekeeper is probably a great word. Don't know if he's ever going to be a champion, but know that if you're going to compete at the highest level, you got to get past him because he's going to be in there as long as he's competing. He's as dangerous as anybody in that division. And this was an unfortunate one for Ryan Spann.
The finishing sequence was fun. I guess it's a fun from a visual standpoint. It was a very fun little sequence because Krylov was putting the pace on him. Ryan Spann, you could see he was getting tired quickly from the sprint that was having to have happened prior to that. Ryan Spann gets out of a couple bad positions early, shucks Krylov off the back, where Krylov then is now on his back, Ryan Spann standing up, and I can see it in Ryan Spann's head. This is my get back moment right here. This is and he throws that. He comes looping down in the Fedor punch, as I call it, right into a triangle.
It's unfortunate. That's a great shout there with the fatal punch. It's so true, man. And that's what an elite level grappler can do to you, right? Like one little mistake, and it's not even necessarily a mistake. It's just capitalizing on the position that you're in and knowing exactly what to do in response to it. And Krylov is a dude that, over time you may be able to outwork, but you have to be so aware with everything he does early, both striking and grappling wise. And it caught Ryan Spann here.
It was at the theater in the Virgin Hotel, because at the Apex Center that night was the slap fighting finale. I don't know whether I'm embarrassed to say or whatever, because it has gotten so much heat online. And I don't understand the heat, because these grown men are signing up for this, right? But I have been such a fan, especially, I don't know the name, so I'm not going to statistically talk about it with everybody, right? I don't understand the velocity force versus the tension in the neck and the jaw rating and like all those stats that they put up. It's irrelevant to me. I'm watching two grown men slapping the piss out of each other. And I'm like, oh, he moved his feet. That's a foul. That's a foul. And then you get like the Jason Herzogs of the world and all these other refs, and they're in there like, it's just a funny scene to me, but I'm so enthralled by it. But you know who else was enthralled by it? The Morgan family was. I saw them on the live stream reacting to a vicious KO. Did your wife and son just love it?
Yeah, it's funny. So it is funny to even talk about this, because as soon as you start talking about it, you're going to get hate, man. Anytime you post anything, you mention anything, people are going to come out of the woodwork and hate on you. But I'll be honest with you. Since I've first seen slap fighting years and years ago, before there was ever a power slap, before Dana White was ever involved, it was always intriguing to me, like bizarrely so. Like, I don't know why I'm watching it, but I can't turn away from it. And my wife and kid, they were like, hey, we want to go to the finale. So we all went as a family, got to check it out, and they had a blast, man. They had an absolute, the scene at the Apex was wild. There was a big audience in there, and man, it just, the reaction to it that people see is amazing. My kid actually like thinks it's fun because it's faster than MMA. Like, I guess MMA is too slow of a sport for him. This thing is built for the TikTok generation. It's just quick in, quick out. It happens fast. And yeah, listen, you could have such a long debate, and I've had debates over this with people, and I get people that say like, hey, this is stupid. Like, okay, I agree. Like,
yes, it is
stupid. It
is.
But I end up watching it. You know what I mean? And the biggest thing that people, it's all, dude, I'm telling you, some of those highlights that happened on Saturday night were unbelievable. And if I checked it out yesterday, actually. I just wanted to go see. I went to the Power Slap YouTube, not the YouTube page, the Instagram page, actually, just to see what kind of clicks they were getting. Oh my God. I mean, multiple videos with multiple million views. The numbers are on social media are off the charts for this thing.
Power Slap Instagram is phenomenal. If you are not following it, you are doing yourself a disservice. If you're following like Street Fight Knockouts on Instagram and all these other dumb things, follow Power Slap Instagram. It's savagely, viciously awesome. This is what I want to say, though. This is what I want to ask, actually. What does it sound like in the Apex Center?
Unbelievable, dude. The sound of those shots, the slaps when they land, because it's silent. Like, because everybody's sitting there in anticipation. Like during an MMA fight, the crowd's cheering and everybody's, so there's occasional times where you hear a shot and you're like, oh my goodness. But in Power Slap, like, everybody's quiet because you're all just going, wow, watching them line it up, and they do that like 1, 2, and then pop. It's crazy, man. The sound is nuts. And man, the crowd was getting into it. The main event was crazy because you had a big shot land, and Darius the Destroyer, he gets up and he gets the 9 count, and it looks like he's okay, and everybody's kind of, it's quiet because everybody's waiting to see, and then the ref asks him to take a step to the side just to double check, and he staggers a little bit, so you see he's out, and the whole crowd just erupts like, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's if you haven't checked it out, I know, again, and I know people are going to give us heat. I know they're going to talk trash. I don't care, but it's exactly what you said. Like, whose Instagram feed doesn't have some kind of street fight in it? Some kind of Derek Lewis showing people getting run over or whatever. I mean, that's what this is. It's crazy stuff, but at least they're getting like medically tested for it before and afterwards, and they're getting paid for it. I don't know, man. I don't have quite the outrage that other people do. Is it bizarre and dumb? Yes. Do I watch it? Yes.
Don't tread on me. I like power slap. I'm not going to have my kid do it, or I'm not going to do it.
No.
But I'm going to watch it.
No.
It's old Roman Coliseum. Entertain me. Are you not entertained? Hell yes, I am. And you know what?
I agree.
The production of the show was great. The storylines they built on there was phenomenal. I was thoroughly entertained by this season. And I'm gonna take a sentiment. I'm gonna take the same sentiment that your son did. Now, one, I don't think MMA is too slow, but for that like instant endorphin that I need every now and again, power slap's the way to go.
Yeah, it's fast. It just moves quick. It just gives you it's built for social media. It is built for the TikTok generation, and I think that's why it's going to continue to thrive and survive. And I think people that are praying for its downfall are just going to have to realize like it's going to be there. It's made for this generation. It happens very quick. It's highlights over and over and over. I mean, what sport is it like? Even if it misses, it's still a highlight. You know what I mean? It's still crazy to watch.
You're a big fan of soccer, right? Or football, or on the pitch, or whatever it is that we say, right? I always said this: soccer highlights are the best highlights there are in sports. But the game, to me, like, I can't sit through a game. Now you take this is like the highlights of MMA, and it's only highlight. The whole event is just a highlight. Sign me up to watch it. Man, I'm glad it's streaming live. I'm glad I can get it for free, because guess what? I'm going to keep getting it for free. I'm going to keep watching it. Thank you, Uncle Dana, for not making this on pay-per-view. And you got a fan in me, albeit I still think it's stupid.
But you can add those things simultaneously.
Yes,
this has been my biggest argument with people, because the argument, if somebody wants to say it's stupid, I won't argue with them. I agree. But if they say, well, and I don't think it should happen, because I don't get that. If you're a grown adult getting paid for something and you decide that you want to sign up for it and be a part of it, like, you should get to do that. And what I hear people say is, yeah, but think about this. It's causing brain injury. Like, it's clearly causing brain injury. And yes, it is. Unfortunately, so does mixed martial arts. So does boxing. So does any combat sport. And that is the unfortunate reality of what we do. And if you haven't balanced that, if you haven't understood that that's what's going on here, then I don't know what to tell you, because, I hear people say, yeah, well, I think it's brutal because people can't defend themselves. Well, guess what? Your brain doesn't know the difference. Just because you could have defended yourself against that high kick that landed and knocked you unconscious doesn't mean that your brain reacts any differently. You still took the same amount of damage. So I just don't understand. If you're going to come to me and say, I don't support combat sports at all, I just can't do it, I think it's, it shouldn't be done, I understand your position on that. But if you're saying I'm okay with combat sports, but I'm only okay with these and not this, that I don't understand. The danger that the athletes are putting themselves in is the same in every scenario. And so I don't understand how you selectively decide what you're okay with and what you're not okay with.
We will end it there. I just hope that there's not a lot of amateur power slap leagues going on in kids' living rooms these days. That's the only thing I did want to say. Mom and Dad, police that for me, would you? But moving on, this weekend, we have another pay-per-view, UFC 286, London, England. Champion Leon Edwards defends his belt for the first time after the "come on, Rocky, you can do it, Rocky, do it, Rocky" head kick heard around the world versus Kamaru Usman, maybe the greatest welterweight champion of all time. It is going down this Saturday. And there hasn't been a lot of promotion, but to your point, it's the week of. It's going to start kicking up. We're going to start seeing that replay over and over. And Leon Edwards is just going to say, you know what? Yes, he is still awesome, but can he mentally recover? Because I live rent-free in Kamaru Usman's head now. And Usman, he's going to say nothing. I made one small mistake. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to dominate like I always do. What say you, John Morgan?
That's what I love about this, because the hype around this fight doesn't have to be around them selling it. The storyline is there. It's real. It's meaningful, right? You had Usman, who was, coming up on these all-time records of most victories, most title defenses, most everything, and was dominating this fight. And then one small moment changed everything. Leon Edwards, the head kick heard around the world, dropped him, fight over, new champ. But now, there's people that say, on the one hand, you got people that say, man, look at the character that Leon Edwards showed. He's had to battle for everything. He's been given nothing. He had to work for everything till the very end, a fight that looked like he was going to lose. He refused to go away, and he still delivered. Then you got other people that say, hey, man, let's be honest. Leon Edwards already lost to Usman the first time they fought. He was losing this fight, and he threw up one shot and got lucky. Now, I never liked the lucky shot, right? Like, wait a minute.
For everybody listening in podcast land and not watching, John Morgan's did put up air quotes, so he doesn't believe that.
There's a lot of air quotes. If you're not, thank you, sir. If you're not watching audio, if you throw a shot with the intention of knocking somebody out and it lands, it's not lucky, especially when you go back and watch training footage where they're like, man, he dips off to the right a little bit. The left high kick will be there after an exchange. Like, throw the jab, he'll move that way.
Hiding it behind the jab.
Exactly. It's so, definitely not lucky. But again, that's the storyline, right? Is that, hey, man, let's be honest. My guy Usman was winning. Your guy, he threw up that shot. Okay, it landed. But let's be honest. And it is, look, it is true. They fought almost 8 rounds, and Usman has won about 7.95 of those rounds, except for
6.95.
You're right. I take that back.
Round 1.
I take that back. But that's what makes this intriguing, right? Like, there's some fights that, the build up to them and the storyline behind them is like, well, did you hear what he said about his mom? Like, oh yeah, but did you see? You know what I mean? That's not what this is about, right? This is about an all-time great in Kamaru Usman who, got caught by a strategic Leon Edwards who refused to go away even though he was losing in a fight and he was down to his last shot. So that's the kind of guy you're going against, right? That famous quote from John Anik, that does not seem to be the cloth from which this guy is cut. It's not. The character is there. He's never been given anything. He worked for everything. Oh, man, those scenes of the emotion afterwards of him talking to his mom on FaceTime with the belt afterwards, like, oh, my God. Those were some of the most beautiful scenes ever. So intrigued by this fight. And those two dudes don't need to chirp at each other. They don't need to talk trash to each other because it's not about that. This is about coming out and settling a score, and can't wait. And because it's in London, it's in the middle of the afternoon here, so we get like a little matinee show here in the United States.
Sorry, babe, I got to work.
Sorry.
No, I can't go to the park this afternoon. No, I'm sorry, I can't get out there and do the honey-do list right now. I got to work.
Yeah, fight. This for work.
I don't think people give this enough credit. And I don't think the media even, and as a guy who has fought myself, like I can say this firsthand, like psychologically getting knocked out does affect you. Now, a lot of people are saying like, you got lucky, air quotes, and they're not writing from the aspect, or people aren't talking from the aspect of it is a real thing. You get stopped brutally, knocked out, you get scrambled. Sometimes you are not the same. It has happened to legendary boxers. It has happened to MMA fighters. And guess what? You are always going in there depending on your mindset behind it, whether it is always living rent-free in the back of your head. Leon Edwards is banking that is going to happen. And I can't tell him he's wrong, because that is a real thing that I don't think a lot of the pundits are really giving much credit to right now.
It's a great point. And when you say, not necessarily the same, there's two ways to look at that. both physically and mentally, right? Because there is a point where you can't take a shot the way you used to. It's just a neurological thing that your body can't do it anymore. So that's the physical side of it. But then there's the mental side of it, right? Where now you've got that little bit of hesitation because you remember, I got caught, so I can't do this. I can't move in, and you get gun shy for lack of a better word. And that's a very real thing. We've seen it, man. That mental lock that some people have after it happens, it can change a lot. Usman, is he still that dominant figure? Like, is he willing to go in there and engage and to drive forward and to look for that takedown because he knows he's got to get into that striking distance before he gets there? It's a very, very real thing. I think that's a great point.
And I think if that is living rent-free in his head, Kamaru Usman does a phenomenal job of allowing his strikes to engage his wrestling. He probably puts it together better than anybody since like GSP. Right? GSP had this amazing jab that put him in the position to then blast double or whatever. And with Usman, his hands are so fast, so under Trevor Whitman, so polished, and that it allows him to get to the range, to get to that clinch, to get to that grinding style that has beaten everybody, Colby Covington included. If he is gun shy about using those strikes and playing that striking range, then it is going to be damn near impossible to take down a Leon Edwards from range.
It's a phenomenal observation because it's true, right? Like, you think about what makes a successful wrestler successful in mixed martial arts. It's not necessarily that they have the best takedowns. It's the fact that, they're taking you down when you think you're striking. They're striking when you think you're ready for a takedown, right? Like, a lot of these guys, you just put them in a pure, like, hey, we're doing wrestling practice today. Boom, defend, sprawl, defend. They're amazing, right? But it's when somebody throws that jab and you get your hands up and you're looking to slip and counter, and that's when they come in and shoot on your legs. And all of a sudden the takedown is successful. And that's exactly what Usman did, right? He really polished up that jab to that point that he would just get you, all right, here we go. And when you thought, okay, all right, we're striking. Now I'm going to defend this jab. I'm going to parry. I'm going to counter. That's when he shoots in on your legs. That's when he moves into the clinch. That's when he gets the takedown. And you're 100% right about that. I mean, and again, that's what makes this fight so compelling. You don't have to sell who doesn't like each other, who hates each other. It's really just whose game can be implemented here and who's going to have eternal bragging rights after this one, right, man? I mean, this is massive. And it's in London. The UK boy gets to defend his belt on home turf. I mean, the crowds in London at the O2 are always incredible. They're going to be extra jazzed for this one, man. I love it. Cannot wait for this main event.
I have not looked at it, but I just grabbed my phone. I haven't looked at the odds. Have you looked at the odds yet? Don't look them up if you haven't. Have you?
I haven't. Nope, I have not.
Okay. I got to, I'm trying to pull it up, but what would you say? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say Kamaru Usman is a plus or minus 220 favorite.
Okay, yeah, boy, you scared me for a second. There's absolutely no way. There's no way Usman is an underdog.
No,
here.
minus 220.
Minus 220. I kind of like that actually. Yeah, like minus 200, minus 220, because there wouldn't be a pick him because he's had more work and he's dominated the rounds. He did get caught. Yeah, I'll say minus 200. I like that. I think you're right. I think you're spot on. Are we right or wrong?
I was pretty damn close. Minus 260.
260.
That's a little higher than I would have thought.
Wow. Yeah, that's higher than I would have thought. I thought you were right around it. I went a little more conservative. It's higher. But that just goes to show you. Look, that just goes to show you how good Usman is. And I think how a lot of people look at this is that, yeah, Edwards won, but come on. I mean, we know that Usman was dominating. But that's the other thing that makes this dangerous, right? Is that Usman, I mean, Jorge Masvidal might argue otherwise, but Usman doesn't necessarily have that one-shot finishing power as his strength. He does, but that's not really what he goes to. It's more about dominating you over time. And Edwards, from moment 1 to moment 25, has the ability to finish the fight. So, I would, man.
260 is a little high for me, but yeah.
260 sounds high, but I'm not.
Bet.
No, I would not make that bet. If I'm picking, I'll be honest with you, I am picking Usman to win this fight, but 260 sounds awful high to me. Awful high.
Yeah, that's not a value bet for you, and then you can't realistically take Usman in that position because that's not smart money on a fight like this. So I don't know. I guess maybe that's Vegas throwing it out there saying, let's bring some money in on Edwards because they're known to play that game. Who knows? But the co-main event is Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. This line, actually, I just saw it. Where do you say the line is on this? Have you seen it? You're looking it up. I can tell by your eyes.
I was looking it up right now just see, so I just saw it and it's not where I thought it would have been. I would have thought this was damn near a pick 'em if I'm being honest with you.
Yes.
To see
This is a Rafael Fiziev minus 260 as well.
That shocks me. And again, I mean, when this fight was announced, everybody was stoked because these are two incredible strikers. I mean, this is going to be stylistically an absolute barn burner. What a way to lean. I mean, this fight should be absolute fireworks, and then to lead into that, title fight. I mean, that's phenomenal matchmaking, phenomenal card building by the UFC. But to see that line, I'm shocked because can Fiziev win? Absolutely, he can win. He's a phenomenal striker, but I think Gaethje's a phenomenal striker as well. Gaethje does have better wrestling. Now, he doesn't like to use it very often, but he could if he starts finding himself in trouble a little bit. If he finds himself. Yeah, man. That line absolutely shocks me.
I'm going to go place a bet on Justin Gaethje, not because I think he'll win, just because it's a value pick for me.
I agree. I would too. That's the play all day long.
This card is actually pretty, it's got name value, but doesn't have name value. We got Marvin Vettori on the card, Gunnar Nelson, Brian Barberena fighting. It looks like a fun card. Definitely worth for me, it's worth the buy. It's worth the money, but I mean, they all are for me. But I would say for your casual fan, the UFC kind of did a good job of putting some exciting fights on there, because who knows what that main event is going to be. We have no idea what this main event is going to be. But then you got the Justin Gaethje. Marvin Vettori is always a colorful figure, especially fight week. He's gonna be some fun. That Barberena fight, Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson likes to fight at his range, his pace, and with his grappling. And Barberena is known to make everything ugly. I'm excited to watch that fight too.
Yeah, you see a couple of unranked guys on a pay-per-view main card, and you go, well, what are they doing here? Oh, because they're going to be fun. Like, it's going to be an entertaining main card. And I like it. It's an early card. You know what I mean? You get a little matinee action. I think this is going to be a fun one. As you said, a lot of European names on there. I mean, it's a European event, so you're taking a lot of fighters from that area. But that main card, as you said, Marvin Vettori versus Roman Dolidze, that could be a really fun fight, and that's a meaningful fight at middleweight as well. Jennifer Maia, Casey O'Neill, a couple of ranked women's flyweight. That women's flyweight division obviously has gotten shaken up a little bit with a new champion at the top of it, so that's gotten a little bit more intriguing. Yeah, so this should be a fun card. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we're going a little long today, but there was a lot to talk about, and then I just got immersed into the power slap. My apologies. But hey, go check it out on TikTok. Go check it out on Instagram. Follow Power Slap on Instagram. You will not regret it. Or you may just tweet me and probably tell me that I'm a sociopathic lunatic for enjoying it. But hey, I'm here for it. Follow both of us on Twitter. That man is John Morgan _MMA. He's always busting out scoops. He's always got hard-hitting interviews. He's linking a lot of his articles from mixedmartialarts.com or sportsillustrated.com. Give the man a follow. And I really have no value to add with my Twitter, but just out of pity, follow me, E_MacLife. What you got going on other than the obvious this weekend?
I'm actually heading out to Canada this week. I've got a commentary gig for Fight League Atlantic out there in Moncton, Canada. Hopefully, my voice is back by then, man. I'm glad I made it through. I was a little under the weather all last week, but yeah, back in the commentary booth on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to it. I get to watch UFC 286 in the afternoon, then head on over to the Moncton Coliseum for Fight League Atlantic on Saturday night.
That's awesome. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.